How do we screen out those that share an ideology that is incompatible with Western values, incompatible with American values? Here are the questions I would suggest that we use. Number one, if you have a Muslim or somebody from a Muslim country who wants to immigrate to the United States, question number one, do you believe in Israel's right to exist? That's question number one. Do you believe in Israel's right to exist? If the answer is ambivalent, if the answer is no, then it's not going to happen. We are not going to allow you to immigrate to the United States because support for the nation of Israel is a classic, long-standing American ideal. And yet in the Muslim world, we've talked about this before, Palestinian students to this day, they are studying textbooks. Their textbooks on geography have maps of the Middle East in them. You know what's missing on those Middle Eastern maps? Israel. It's not on the maps. So these Palestinian children, they live right next door to Israel, and they grow up being taught that Israel does not exist, doesn't have a place on a map. So that's question number one. Does Israel have a right to exist? Question number two, do you renounce all Palestinian acts of terror against Israel and the Israelis? Do you renounce Palestinian terror attacks against Israel and against Israelis? And they'll have a hard time with that. I remember back when I was pastoring in Boise, I've told this story before, but the imam of the local mosque in Boise called me up and invited me to go out to lunch with him. And I said, fine, let's do it. So we went out to lunch together, and he said, look, the reason I want to have lunch with you is I want to know if you can tell me what we can do as a mosque to improve our standing and our reputation in the community. What can we do to improve our relationship with the community? And I said, that's easy. Number one, publicly declare to this community that Israel has a right to exist. Number two, publicly denounce Palestinian acts of terror against Israelis and against the Jewish people. And his eyes got wide. He got the shocked look on his face. He kind of leaned back in the booth there at Elmer's Pancake and Steakhouse on Fairview Avenue, and he said, I could never do that. He says, I could never get more than 50%. I could never get a majority of the people in my mosque to agree with either one of those two principles. So there's no way that we could do that. And this is in Boise. This is in the West. And these are people that have lived there for some time. They could not bring themselves to admit that Israel even has a right to exist, could not bring themselves to denounce Palestinian acts of terror where they are stabbing Israelis in public places. So those are the first two questions. Question number three, do you believe that the 9/11 attack was carried out by Muslims or by Jews? So they will either celebrate the 9/11 attack as a victory for jihad, in which case we don't want them in this country, or they will say we didn't have anything to do with it. It was the Jews. It was the Jewish conspiracy that was behind that. So that would be a way of flushing them out. Question number four, do you believe the Holocaust occurred? Many Muslims, in fact, probably most Muslims, deny that the Holocaust even happened. If you've got denial of that magnitude, that's an indication of an obsession with Islamic thought incompatible with where we're at as a nation. Number five, have you made the pilgrimage to Mecca? That's the fifth question to ask. This is obligatory according to the Quran on every Muslim, and it's a significant effort. I mean, unless you live in Saudi Arabia, it's a significant effort to make pilgrimage to Mecca, to Saudi Arabia. So if someone's done it, if they've made pilgrimage to Mecca, that's an indication that somebody's hardcore in their allegiance to the Islamic faith. Number six, do you support legal punishment for those who leave the Islamic faith? In other words, committing apostasy, Islamic apostasy, leaving the Islamic faith, is that something that ought to be punished? Is that something that ought to be sanctioned? And what this will do is it will test their commitment to the free exercise of the Christian religion, the free exercise of the Christian faith. Number seven, do you want the United States one day to be governed by Sharia law? So what this will do is test their willingness to embrace the Constitution as the supreme law of the land. Number eight, are you willing to give up any right to have Muslim holidays on school calendars and halal food in school cafeterias and prisons? What this will reveal is whether they are willing to assimilate into American culture and to adopt American cultural values. We ask them on the front end, you give up the right to have Muslim holidays on the school calendar. You give up the right to have halal food in the school cafeteria. You give up the right to have halal food in our prison system. Do you agree, yes or no? And check the box. And then if they check the box, they complain about it later. Look, we got the box. You checked it. Give it a rest. Number 9, do you believe anyone who creates an image of Muhammad should be punished? And again, this is a classic test of their willingness to assimilate, because in the West, in the Christian West, it is not a crime to draw a picture of Muhammad. It's not a crime to draw a picture of Jesus Christ. We do it all the time. We have images of Christ in our homes. It's not a crime to draw a portrait of Abraham or Moses, or whatever you think they look like. It's not a crime in the West to do this, but it is under the Quran. It is under Sharia law. So we need to ask them, do you think that's something that ought to be punished? So these 9 questions are ways to kind of flesh out whether these people are going to be ready to adhere to our Constitution and assimilate to the culture of the United States. And, you know, if they can't pass the test, I've said this before, but if they can't pass the test, I believe our official posture as a nation, if they can't pass this simple immigration test, can't answer these 9 questions to our satisfaction, then we say, look, you're not going to be welcome in the United States. We can't bring you in here. We've got a culture. We have values we want to protect. We have a society. We need to protect its integrity. We need to protect the fabric of our culture. We can't allow it to be frayed. But we want to do the best for you. And so we are going to help you find a place. There's 57 Muslim countries in the world. If Islam, as you tell us, is a religion of peace, that means there are dozens and dozens of havens of tranquility and peace. We will help you find the favorite Muslim destination of your choice. You can live in a culture that celebrates your values. You can be at home there. You'll be happier, and we will be safer.